Hello and welcome to a rather serious episode of Three Blokes in the Pub, because today we are on the border of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We spent the morning in Belfast. We've had some meetings with some people who are well qualified in the law and also
fairly high level people
in the politics of Northern Ireland. We visited Stormont, which is where the Northern Irish government is supposed to sit, but hasn't been sitting for the last 2 years.
2 years now, just over 2 years. Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately.
We're joined by Robert Stephenson, who is from Dublin originally. Do you want to just introduce yourself to the viewers?
Well, hi, I'm Robert from Dublin. I've been following, of course, Three Blokes in a Pub for a while, and when I heard they were on about the border, I said, come on guys, come over and check it out for yourselves. So picked them up today, drove them around, met some interesting people. Here we are on the border, and let's get into it.
So this town is called Jonesborough,
Yeah.
is that right? And it is right on the border.
Right on the border.
There's a farmer's field across the road that we just visited. That's actually in the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah.
Now, can we start by discussing what's going to happen if we crash out without a deal, which seems to be the preferred method of withdrawal at the moment by the Tory party.
And the DUP.
And Labour, by the looks of things.
Sinn Féin.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody who's a politician who wants to make a quick buck out of Brexit. The regular people, they don't seem to give a shit. They don't seem to care about us very much. Excuse my French.
I can tell you're feeling quite passionate today because you actually just swore, and you're the guy who said,
"Oh, we've only just started.
Don't swear on these podcasts."
Yes, my rule is no swearing on the podcast.
So what happens, Jason? What happens? Day one, we suddenly have no withdrawal agreement. We had no deal, effectively. 30th of March, the morning of 30th of March. What happens to the farmer's gate over the road there?
Nobody knows. That is the problem. Nobody knows what happens. The rules say, we know what the rules say because it's international law. You know, the World Trade Organization says, look, if United Kingdom, you're out of the European Union, you've got no free trade deals anywhere in the world. Every single country we sell to around the world, I've done this in a few previous episodes, they will have to apply tariffs. We'll have to start measuring the volume.
Is this
and
the
value of
EU
goods.
bullying us into?
No, this is the World Trade Organization rules.
Oh, this
EU.
is Geneva. This is the World Trade Organization. So it's not the EU forcing us to put tariffs on our goods.
164 countries around the world all agreed that here's the set of rules that we're going to trade by globally if you remember the WTO. If you decide that you have got no free trade agreements, each of those individual countries have spent years and years and years developing what they call a schedule of tariffs and tariff rate quotas and country-specific quotas for goods, for agriculture, for services. And they say, what do we make in the UK? What do we want to protect?
Yeah.
What's our key industries that we want to look after? And here we are checking where we are. We're in the Northern Ireland.
Well, we're about
100 meters,
15 meters from the
15 meters.
Yeah, from the actual Irish border here.
But then they'd say that down there, but we work in yards still, don't we, over here?
No, but see,
shilling and pence
in the
and
Republic we work
guineas
in kilometres and metres.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, and you know...
Of course, here you're from the Republic, yeah.
There you go.
Do you know one of those dirty immigrants, right?
I'm one of those free staters, yeah.
Do you know not the first motion, but the first time that it was tabled at the House of Commons to bring in the metric system into the United Kingdom was in the 50s. The 1850s. You look it up, get your Google out, check it out.
Get your Google out.
Yeah.
That's my catchphrase, you thief. Anyway, so,
go on.
World Trade Organization, all these countries know what their tariffs are if they're buying something from a country that's a third country where they've got no trade agreements at all. That's what the United Kingdom is going to be if we leave with no withdrawal agreement.
Yeah.
Oh, even if we leave with the withdrawal agreement, we're still going to be a third country on the 31st of December 2020. Because that's when we leave the European Union.
Hang on,
and
but
all our treaties cease.
Yeah, but if we get a withdrawal agreement, that would include presumably a transition period in
Until
which
2020.
everything stays the same. So that avoids the cliff edge.
No, it doesn't. It just pushes back the cliff edge from the 29th of March next year to December 31st, 2020.
But by then, won't we have the technology so that at the 200 odd places where you can cross the border, there'll be some digital means of checking what you've got in the boot of your car?
If you put up something on the border, I guarantee within 24 hours it won't be there. right? It's going to be removed by
who?
Well, by whoever objects to it. It can be a bunch of right wing or left wing, or it can be DUP or Sinn Féin or whoever. But it's like nobody wants it, and so the first people coming along are just going to remove it because nobody. And we've had a conversation here with the lovely people in this bar, and they're sort of saying, "We're not going back there." No. The barman used to be a haulier, and he said, he used to wait 4 hours down the road to get across the border, right? So can you imagine what that's going to do? And with the interesting thing too,
to actually multiply that out. Do you know how many crossings there are of trucks of this border, non-border as it were, every year?
Millions.
45 million truck crossings a year. So
that is a very busy truck.
It's not just one. It's lots and lots
it's
of
lots
trucks.
of
But it's not 45 million trucks, and it's not because they might sort of load up, milk in the north and then drive to the south, and turn it to butter.
Who monitors that? Is there a guy at the board on the
But at the moment it's backwards and
with
forwards.
a clicker?
Yeah, they go backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And there's 208 official border crossings up here.
208.
Yeah,
208.
What's the, how many miles is it? Kilometres? Is
It's
it?
nearly 500 kilometres.
So 500 kilometres, 208 official border crossings. And that's not including the laneways and the back lanes that we use to get to where we are right now. It doesn't include the tracks, doesn't include the planks that are going across rivers so people can walk from one side to the other. 208 official ones.
And if you contrast that, just a matter of interest, right? Eastern Europe, where the EU ends and the East, guess how many border crossings there are on the whole of Eastern Europe from north to south, right? As against the 208 in Ireland, I think it's 130.
Wow.
130 between the Baltic and the Caspian Sea or the Balkans. Between the Baltic and the Balkans, 170 or 130 something. 130 I think it is, right? But it's about half.
Yeah, no doubt the viewers will fact check
Well,
this and they'll
yeah.
say in the
Get your
few
views out.
comments.
Yeah.
But it's fewer.
A lot fewer.
Yeah. I mean, and then you think about, well, we've just driven down a road that goes like this, so it crosses the border half a dozen times.
Yeah.
And it's one road. There's no turn-offs.
No.
So it's like, well, if we leave the European Union and our driving licenses are invalid in the EU, and our car insurance is invalid in the EU, we could be driving like a quarter of a mile, we're insured and we're valid to drive, then we're illegal from it, then we go back this way, then we go back this way, then we go back this way, and we're insured, uninsured, insured. And what happens if we have an accident on one of the corners when we're in the wrong side of the border? Unless we've got 2 insurance policies, 2 driving licenses.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
Well, I mean,
ridiculous to try and think about
Well, that's a sort of a technical problem, but the real problem, the down-to-earth problem, is that there's going to be 4 hours of a queue, and worse because, and this gentleman was saying, he was queuing 4 hours back in the trouble times, right, which is 20-something years ago, just over 20 years ago, 4 hours. Now, nowadays you've got tachometers, so if you're in a truck and you take goods from Dublin to Belfast and you have to queue for 4 hours at the border, right? By the time you're finished there, you might not even be able to drive to any further because your time is up.
Oh, you're only allowed to drive for 8 hours because of truck drivers falling asleep and murdering everybody on a motorway.
Yeah, exactly.
With
So
their
if you're
big truck,
but they count time that you're waiting at border crossings, etc. So can you imagine what that's going to do to the logistics and to the transport industry in Ireland, on the island of Ireland?
why are you saying that nobody wants this when Labour, the Conservatives, the DUP and Sinn Féin are all gung-ho for Brexit, which means that there will be a hard border?
No, the Sinn Féin are not gung-ho for Brexit. On the contrary, they, along with all of the parties in Northern Ireland, every single one except the DUP, campaigned, if you like, for Remain. And 56%.
In the same way that Jeremy Corbyn campaigned.
Well,
Did they bust people out
no. Let's say
to vote like they
the Sinn
normally
Féin
do?
were a little bit less enthusiastic.
Okay, so they
than
didn't bust
could have
anyone
been.
out to vote.
And you know why? Because it sort of
Because-
suits their agenda. That's why.
Well, this is what I'm saying. So
Right.
even though the hard border is going to be catastrophic for Ireland and Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
these politicians and their machinations in their heads
Yeah.
are going, actually, this could be in our interests.
You will explain, right? Because it's an important point. Because if you think of it long term, what's going to happen is, say, for example, at the moment we're heading for a crash out, we're having a car crash at the end of March. And the way things are going, particularly after what was hearing, the Northern Ireland politicians, the DUP essentially, Arlene Foster and those talking today in London at the Conservative conference, at the Ulster Breakfast, as they have it. Mm-hmm. And what she said today, and what May has been saying for the last few days, and what various of these Northern Irish politicians on the DUP side have been saying is they're not going to stand for any border in the Irish Sea or here. In other words, it's an impossible situation. It's a conundrum that cannot be solved, right? You cannot get a square peg into a round hole. It's not possible. So essentially, getting back to the point of the Sinn Féin. Now, when there was an election, the referendum happened in Northern Ireland. 56% of the people in Northern Ireland voted to remain. Now, the amount of people who normally vote for the DUP would be around 42%, right? So in other words, about 14% of the people who voted to remain were actually unionists as well. So they weren't. It wasn't just the Protestants versus the Catholics.
Can we just do a quick glossary for people watching this, because there's an assumption that people in Britain know about Irish politics or Northern Irish politics, and they really don't. So just to be clear, unionists are people who want to stay British here in Northern Ireland.
The unionists, if you like, are generally Protestant and generally are the people who...
I was trying to leave religion out of this.
But you can't leave religion. In Ireland, you can't leave religion out of politics because it's part of the same thing. This is the problem we have, unfortunately, right? Okay. So nationalists are generally Catholic, unionists are generally Protestant. Now, within the Unionist Party, you've got different sections, and you've got, if the more extreme unionists would be the DUP, or the Democratic Unionist Party, that was founded by Ian Paisley back in the 60s.
And
right?
they voted against
They were
Good
the
Friday
one party
agreements.
against, right, and they voted to leave. They pushed their supporters to vote for leave, and they lost. So, but they are still the controlling party in Northern Ireland, and so they're working against the democratic decision of the people of Northern Ireland, because they say, well, we have to go with the democratic decision of Great Britain. Now, they do that when it suits them.
And Northern Ireland.
The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
And Northern Ireland, right. Yeah. But it is the Conservative and Unionist Party as well, which Theresa May is very quick to emphasise over the last year and a half.
Funny that.
I just wonder why.
Because it was ever saying it before the referendum.
Okay. Well, they were sort of embarrassed about this unionist bit, but now it suits them.
Just to go back to the glossary then. So you've got the DUP, who are ultra nationalists, and then you've got Sinn Féin.
No. The DUP are ultra loyalists. They are leavers. The nationalists are the Catholics, and they want to remain.
Oh my word. Okay,
right?
So ultra-unionists, meaning that they want to stay with the United Kingdom.
I tell you what, we're really confusing people here.
Yeah. Can we just cut to the chase? Okay, so the unionists and the loyalists are the same. Yeah. And then on the other side, you've got the Republicans.
And the nationalists are sort of the same. Nationalists.
But they're not nationalists like the BNP. They're more...
Just call them UKIPs, that's what they're known as.
They're more nationalists like the SNP, who are Scottish nationalists.
Yes, you got it.
Okay.
Right.
Whew.
All right. Now, of course, between that, there's the in-betweeners, the Alliance Party, the Green Party, the SDLP, which is Catholic but moderate.
Yeah.
And you've got the Unionist Party, which is like unionist but not as extreme as the DUP. So there's the range of things. There was a spectrum, right? Now, the thing about it is when I get back to what I was saying about Sinn Féin, in the long term it suits Sinn Féin for very simple reasons, because people are going to get so pissed off, if you excuse my French, with this re-emergence of the border. It's going to affect them financially. A lot of the Protestant or loyalist, loyalist farmers around here are going to suffer hugely. Yeah. Everyone's going to suffer.
Yeah.
Massively, right? So the only way that the north of Ireland has to get back into the EU if it crashes out is by what's going to be is known as a border poll. In other words, it's already in the Good Friday Agreement that people in Northern Ireland have the option to have a vote in the future about whether they want to be part of the Republic of Ireland and therefore stay in the EU or rejoin the EU if they've left, or not, right? So what's going to happen is Sinn Féin's vibe is, okay, this actual Brexit is good for us politically because it does mean is that a lot of unionists or Protestants who are going to be financially compromised and socially compromised by this are going to want to vote for a united Ireland, right? So the actual date, it's an inevitable thing in terms of voting. Within 5 years, there's going to be more voting Catholics or nationalists than Protestants or loyalists.
One of the things I took out of the discussions earlier on this morning.
In Stormont, yeah. So it's if you in the schools, in secondary schools at the moment. Yeah, go on.
5 years, because the demographics are changing of people. You know, the older generations are going, the younger people are coming on stream, and the demographics are changing, and it's moving towards a more united Ireland.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second. Northern Ireland, there's 1.1 million people up here?
1.8.
1.8 million about, yeah.
Million people up here. They're currently British. And as the demographics change, this vote is going to come at some point. They'll have a referendum on a unified Ireland. That's 1.8 million people who voted, or in the majority, to stay in the European Union. Westminster is dragging them out in the same way it's dragging out the Scots, who voted overwhelmingly to remain.
And Liverpool.
Kicking and screaming, Westminster is dragging us out of the European Union against the current will of the people.
But what I want to get back to is what you were just saying about Sinn Féin. Labour are doing the same thing. They are believing that if they just help the government on its way to this no-deal Brexit, they will take over government, because that's all they care about. And Sinn Féin is thinking, oh, but when you talk about the effects of a cliff edge Brexit and no deal Brexit, it's not just people gonna, be a bit more difficult to get into work. It's going to be absolutely catastrophic. We've already appointed last week a minister for starvation, a minister for food distribution, a minister for food rationing, effectively. What are we going to see next year? Troops going from home to home and checking in your cupboard how much flour you've got?
No, because they'll be all out in the street stopping the riots and civil commotion that are going to result from the fact of not being able to go into a shop and buy fruit and vegetables and meat and everything else and cheese from France. Because there's going to be, my huge worry, and the reason I'm sitting here is because I am scared to death that there's going to be a border put back in Ireland.
Yes.
And that is going to cause a re-emergence of the violence.
Yeah.
Well, whatever about the chaos on the queues, it's going to be an excuse for the gunmen of both sides to start this rubbish again, right?
Yeah.
Killing people.
Targeting.
Now, we're just down the road from Forkhill, right? That's the next town down there.
Yeah.
There's been people over 20, the Troubles, so-called. Every couple of years there was people. The Troubles. I know it's just like it's war.
Using the term ethnic cleansing. Yeah, well, it's genocide.
Well, exactly.
No, it's
murder.
Yeah.
It's murder.
Murder.
So the first two people to be killed in Forkhill, the next town.
Did you catch that?
The first two people. The first two, because there was many.
Not the only two people that were killed in this little village.
The first two was a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, two teenagers, who happened, unfortunately, to be walking past a bomb that was planted by some terrorists, right, IRA in this case, and blew these kids, blew them up.
But they weren't targeting the kids, though.
No, they were targeting the British Army, but of course, which is in itself, there's no excuse for violence or death as far as I'm concerned.
Totally.
And I don't favour one side or the other. I'm neutral.
Why were the soldiers on a border post? Yeah,
well,
because the soldiers are there. What we heard is they're there to protect the police. And why are the police there? Well, the police are there to protect the customs officers. Yeah? And if you put in any kind of customs check or anything else, you've got to have a customs officer to check the paperwork.
So in other words, you're going to have the army back here. You're going to have the army back here.
So what we're seeing is systematically by Sinn Féin and by Labour in Great Britain, a concerted effort to ensure anarchy and that people die in order to pursue their political ends.
Exactly. That is the horror.
And that is reprehensible. And when people...
Not reprehensible. That is...
unconscionable.
It's
unforgivable.
Just... What I can't understand is...
Do you think they understand the magnitude of it?
No, but they don't.
course they don't.
Or else they wouldn't have even had this stupid referendum in the first place.
They wouldn't have even thought
right?
about it.
Because do you
They
think
didn't
that,
know, did they?
They
It
didn't.
wasn't
No,
Labour's
look,
idea.
hold
It
on.
wasn't Sinn Féin's idea.
No,
Let's
it
hang
wasn't.
this on
Sinn
the
Féin
Conservative
did
Party.
campaign against Brexit. Like they want to remain. Now, just jumping around the place a bit is look.
Campaign not very hard.
They didn't campaign as hard as they could have done. Put it that way.
Yes.
But anyway, the majority voted for remain anyway. Right.
True.
So we have the situation now where we're sitting right now, right beside the border, and within the next 6 months there could be, and probably the way it's going will be, a physical border because it has to be under WTO rules and other rules,
Both for the
which is
UK
in
and
breach
for the
of the
European
breach of the Good Friday Agreement, in breach of all of the assurances that would be given by Mrs May, which she's trying to water down as we go
So
forward.
we talk about a lot about the GFA, the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement. But when that was written, it was written on the assumption that both the United Kingdom and the Republic would remain European Union members,
Yeah.
and we would have a common
Yeah.
customs union, a common customs market, common freedom of movement of goods, capital, services, and people.
Yeah.
Now, the UK have come in and effectively, with Brexit and the referendum,
They've just
turned the Good Friday Agreement completely upside down because the entire language of it.
It was
written
assumed
in a
that we would always be part of the same.
Well, here's a
single
really
market.
scary
So
thing.
we're playing by the same rules.
Yeah.
And the UK, we talk a lot about having a border. We talk about customs and goods moving backwards and forwards and trucks and things. But what I've gathered this morning is far more important than that. It's, You've got constitutional
it's life and death
societal,
for
it's
Irish people.
psychological,
It's life and
it's
death
cultural.
for Irish people. That's what it is.
It goes to the heart because you've got people saying, "Oh, hello, kids. You can't be talking to those kids over there. You can't play with them because they're a different religion or they're a different colour." And they called it othering. They're the others. You can't play with the others. You can only play with the people that are in your team. And for the last 20 years, since we've had a bit of peace over here compared to what was happening previously, life's been getting better for people, and there's been less of that othering going on, and people are working closer and closer together. But those barriers and those borders are in people's heads. That it's not a physical border out there on the streets, as we've seen. I took a photograph and tweeted it earlier. You're on one side, I'm on the other. Yep. But as you move that on, you say, well, this still is there.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, in people's minds, and in the culture, and in society, and in between the religions, and everything else.
Yeah.
If you put something physical up, like a customs guard, just one guy stood on the side of the road saying, "Can I see your driving license? Can I see your customs paperwork?"
Yeah.
You're then reinforcing those mental borders.
That's right.
And you're starting to break down society again.
Absolutely right. And what had happened over the last 20 years, because if you like, the EU is a bigger umbrella, and once the Good Friday Agreement was signed and put into place, the border disappeared. They literally physically took up all the blocks and the barriers and the barbed wire and everyone was delighted.
Can I just adjust your mic?
Yeah.
He's grabbing his food.
Anyway, getting back to it is you completely throw me off there. But anyway, when the border left Ireland, if you like, the EU allowed people to travel through the membership of the EU. That the border went, and there was free movement of goods and people and everything else between two parts of the island. So essentially, the differences between the north and the south started disappearing literally day by day, right? And psychologically as well, because the younger people, I'm 65, and I've spent my life in the music entertainment business and in, in social, as a social entrepreneur helping young people in the UK and Ireland. Anyway, the long and the short of all that is, I've been through the troubles. I managed a band in Derry, stroke Londonderry, and I used to drive from Dublin and I crossed across McGlen. Now that was armoured cars, it was helicopters, it was towers, barbed wire, like nothing I ever experienced travelling from Western Europe to Eastern Europe, and I did in the day, right? Yeah. This was like a war zone, right? It was a war zone. Now this is what we're getting back to here. This is going to escalate, right? Because it suits also the DUP, because they want to have this border and this difference because it gives them a reason for being, right? Because if if there's no border and if people get on with each other, and if you know, the worry with some of the DUP fanatics is that if there's ever a united Ireland, that somehow the nationalists are going to come and take their land off them and this type of stuff. That's the mentality, right? But that's the fear that's being put into these people. The reality is, over the last 20 years, is that basically Ireland started to become an island again, which it always was. One place, one island, one country, up until 1921, until the English government at the time decided to put this ridiculous 500-kilometre border.
One of the interesting things, picking up on that, about what the DUP is doing, is that actually it would be in the social, but more importantly the economic interests of Northern Ireland to be special, to be that part of Great Britain that is still in the EU, that is still in the single market, that is still in the customs union, because it would boost the economy of Northern Ireland like
100%.
crazy. Let's look at the economy of the Republic of Ireland. In the 1970s, the Republic of Ireland was one of the worst performing economies in the developed world.
Right.
Right now, they have the 5th biggest GDP.
4th biggest.
Fourth now?
4th, yeah.
Get your Googles out, people.
Yep.
Fifth or 4th biggest GDP per capita PPP.
Yeah, they do. Now, having said that, reality is it's inflated artificially because it's about intellectual property movements in and out of Ireland. So we're not actually
Is it all Bono?
No, it's not all Bono. The Republic of Ireland has a 9% growth at the moment this year, 8.5 to 9% growth, right? Now, the thing is, it's not as good as it sounds because a lot of it's to do with intellectual property. It's also Facebook. It's also all of those American companies.
Google's based in
the
Ireland.
Headquarters for most of the big multinational tech companies is Ireland. Right?
If you're watching this
Apple,
video,
Google,
if you're watching
YouTube.
this video, the penny that I get from you watching this video, it comes from
A
Ireland.
whole penny.
Yeah, you get paid.
Do I get 1/3? Hold on a second.
paid.
You get paid. Do I get 1/3 of that payment?
You get
for this
1/3 of
particular-
the penny, the first one,
Deal.
the first penny.
All right, you're
That's
witness,
That's the only
right.
one.
Okay.
But again, this is why the Northern Ireland is in a unique position.
It
where
could be it could be
accelerate
brilliant.
the cost. And interestingly, when you just said, what was it, 8.5, 9% growth
Yeah, in the Republic. Yeah.
in the Republic?
Here it's
because
not.
We're being told
Minus here.
in Great Britain that we should be forging these new trade deals with the rest of the world because of its amazing growth rate, because most of the growth rate in the world is outside the EU. And the point I continually make is that the 11.1% amazing miracle double-digit growth figure of Bhutan is not really going to be great for British trade because we don't really have anything to sell Bhutan.
Well, on top of that, the
People couldn't
size of
find it on a
Bhutan
map.
is, you know.
Yes, I challenge you. Anyway, go.
But here's the thing, right? So there's actually, look, there's good, bad, and the ugly. There's a great opportunity if it was taken. If the DUP and Sinn Féin and all of the political parties in Northern Ireland, you know, were sensible enough, but unfortunately the DUP aren't because they're extremists, right? They're extreme Brexiteers. Let me just finish that point. Is the EU has already offered at the very start to give Northern Irish a special status, right? So that they would allow Northern Ireland, even though it's part of the United Kingdom, to stay in the single market and the customs union, right? To allow for the free flow of goods and people, etc., across that border here down the road. Now, and that was agreed by Mrs. Bay, was saying, okay, no border. But then the day after she said
there's
that,
a difference in the language, you see, because the European Union, when they talk about no border, they say no border on the island of Ireland.
that's right.
And what the UK government is saying in Westminster is we commit not to put a hard border or checks and controls on the border. There's a huge difference in that language.
Yeah.
Well, the language in
The
December last year was changed
cheeky.
by Theresa May by March.
She
Right, a
reneged
few
on it
months
within
later.
3 months.
Within a day.
Bloody liars in Westminster.
Well, it was worse than that. She made an agreement with the Irish government and the EU about the withdrawal agreement, right? And guaranteed there'd be no border, etc. Now they're trying to get away from that. Now, because of the DUP, the next day, the Arlene Foster, who is the leader of the DUP, declared that there'd be no, that they wouldn't accept it. Now, because the DUP are actually keeping the Conservative government in power at the moment with their 10 Westminster MPs. They are literally the balance of power. So nothing happens without the DUP, Arlene Foster and those, agreeing it. Now, the DUP are a scandalous organisation, is all I can say. Right? A scandalous organisation.
She was sitting down with paramilitary.
No, she wasn't.
She was standing up.
She was standing up.
I think she was caught in a car park in a photograph
having a conversation
with one of the leaders of the UVF.
But he was just helping her with the shopping.
Of course.
Right, just to be clear, what's the UVF?
Well, the Ulster Volunteer Force, which are the Protestant, if you like, or unionist equivalent of the IRA, and in many cases were even more vicious. So they're paramilitaries on both sides, right? Who are both.
We're getting agitated in the pub here. I think they're not happy with that.
What?
I think they're happy with what you just said.
Well,
I think it's
whatever.
The
reality is that we're being listened into. Oh no. Okay. Will we get out of here alive?
We're trying to explain the situation to stupid British people who don't understand.
Yeah, you've got to bear in mind it's British people we're talking to.
So look, okay, let's try and wrap it up then in that sense is that actually what we could have is a fantastic opportunity for Northern Ireland. Yeah. And also would be but hold on, it would also be a very good opportunity for the United Kingdom because it would solve the problem. Because at the moment, the United Kingdom's not going to get any deal unless they agree to a backstop with the Irish government.
Just explain what this backstop thing is.
The backstop is an agreement that guarantees that there will be no border put back on the island of Ireland. Right. That the British government have verbally, permanently, they've agreed that there won't be any more border ever in the future going forward. And they guarantee
Why is that called a backstop?
Because it only comes into play if there is no agreement between the EU and the British government about Brexit, right? So before you can get to even any agreement about Brexit from the EU and the UK, there has to be three things in place. One of the things that needs to be in place is an agreement about the Irish border. And the backstop is to guarantee that because...
So when we say that no deal means no deals, actually...
if that happens,
there would
then
be
the
one
backstop,
deal. There
will
would
be one
deal.
The backstop, which is a safety net to guarantee no border in Ireland.
That's part of the withdrawal agreement. We've talked about the WA and the withdrawal agreement before. There's three parts to it, as Robert rightly says. The citizens' rights, protecting the EU citizens' rights in the UK and EU and UK's rights in the EU. The second is the financial settlement, and the third part is the Irish border. If you don't have any one of those pieces, that's what creates the cliff edge Brexit and no transition deal.
Right.
So the permanent backstop is that third piece.
And that was agreed last December. So that's gone through.
No, way before that. This was decided, David Davis called it, it's going to be the battle of the summer. We're going to discuss what's contained in this withdrawal agreement. We're going to discuss the scheduling of what's going to happen in the Article 50 talks. And it was agreed between the UK, it was the first piece of negotiation under Article 50.
Well, what happened?
What's contained in this withdrawal agreement?
Right. What happened last December was the EU wouldn't continue to have any negotiations until there had been an agreement about a backstop, because the Irish government quite rightly said, okay, if you're going to say that you're agreeing that we've no border put back in Ireland, then we want to see that in writing. Because guess what? The Irish government doesn't, I don't know why, trust the English government.
But that's what Theresa May's saying. She's saying, look, don't worry about the backstop. We'll just agree any old thing with the backstop. We'll agree on
just fob the Irish off until the last minute. And then,
I'd say, well, trust me, because we're going to do a really, really good trade deal in the future at some point over the next 8 to 10 years. So trust me, the backstop will never happen. So just sign up to this DUP.
So
Come on, Arlene, sign up. Come on, Arlene. Come on, Arlene.
So just to move it away from Northern Ireland for a moment, what is going to be the effect of a no-deal Brexit, cliff edge Brexit, on the Republic of Ireland?
Okay, this is a very good question. Well,
it's going to.
Well, put it this way: look at Europe. I mean, Ireland is on the very edge of Europe, right? We are the furthest piece of land, that's over there. So, our economy is a very open economy in the Republic, even as more open than the UK, even. So, what's going to happen for us is that our trade with the world is going to suffer hugely, because everything I think 80% of our goods goes via road across the UK. Now, there's only a couple of crossings. There's like Dublin to Holyhead is the main crossing, but there's also Larne, Stranraer, and there's like down in the south, you got Rosslare to Pembroke, right? So there's only a few crossings, and there's Belfast to Liverpool, but that takes forever. So there's only a few crossings.
Well worth the trip.
But look, when you get to the situation of a Brexit, as we know, everything stops. So literally, all of Holyhead is. I don't know if you've ever been to Holyhead. I have many times taken the boat. There is no room for like trucks to park up for days and days and days. They're on the boat, off the boat, through the customs, and out on the road, right? Because that's the way. There is no time. They might pick out one or two just to double check whatever, but generally it's just like that, right? There is no facilities in Holyhead to facilitate thousands of trucks queuing up, right, to be checked at the border.
They won't,
So basically, the Republic of Ireland is going to be strangled because it won't be able to get its goods down the road to France or Germany or wherever.
Why would they want to send through the UK anymore?
Because
what we learned in Brussels
That's the cheapest way of doing it.
Well,
they have
it's the
plans
fastest.
already.
Well, they have some.
It is the fastest.
It's the fastest and cheapest, right?
Trucks are.
On top of that is the journey that goes from Rosslare, if you like, to France. Then there's a couple of places. Cherbourg is one. Le Havre is the other. That takes a day and a half to 2 days. Now, it's an island. Now, I used to export, as in my past, I exported shellfish from the west of Ireland. Now, if it's all fine if the weather is good, but guess what? The weather isn't always good. And guess what? Sailings are cancelled. Guess what? It costs a fortune to take the boat, right? It costs a lot more money, and you've no guarantee of arriving at the time that you're meant to arrive at. And if you're dealing with goods that are perishable, like agricultural fish, or indeed parts that are needed for a factory in Dusseldorf or Paris or wherever, and it misses the boat because you can't deliver on time, and the costs of transport are so actually it kills the Irish economy. Within a few months, Irish economy, north and south, is dead.
It's going to have to change. You'll have to change.
Well, we're trying to pick up on the cargo boat thing. It's like, but you can fit more containers on a cargo ship. Yes, you can, but you can drive a truck along a British motorway at 60 miles an hour. Is that the law?
70.
Yeah, but I mean, we
60 miles an hour.
can't put live cattle and we can't put lots of things on container trucks.
Yeah.
The agri-food industry in Ireland.
On container ships, you mean?
Container ships.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have the capacity either. Because
But also, container ships go really, really slowly.
Well, they go even much slower.
They're 20 knots. That's
probably a 4-day crossing.
That's a good speed. That's equivalent to about 25 miles an hour.
Well, essentially, it means that it's days rather than, you can drive from Holyhead to London in about 6 hours in the middle of the night, 5.5 hours, even with keeping within the speed limit. So you can actually get from Holyhead to the Eurotunnel in, depending on the time of day and the traffic, 6.5, 8 hours, 9 hours type of thing. So and you're in France.
But also,
So now, going the other way, going by the boat, it's a day and a half at the minimum. Right? And if there's storms and so on, and there's plenty of storms.
If I've got a lobster that's worth a tenner, because it's really fresh, every day that goes by, the value of that shellfish
goes down.
or whatever it is goes cheaper.
And it happened to me, and eventually, it cost us the business because we couldn't fill the containers because of storms getting the shellfish off the foreshore. And we couldn't fill the lorry, so our cost of transport doubled. And then you get
just sending a half full lorry
because of a half full lorry. Yeah, exactly. If you can't fill the lorry and you can't because of the storms, because we're an island and we're subject to the storms and wind, which is getting worse nowadays, as you've seen. The climate change is bringing that in. So in terms of Ireland, our exports are going to be destroyed because we won't be able to meet our delivery dates, and it's going to cost us a lot more money. And even if you have these, they're talking about putting big ships, and they are starting a new shipping line between Ireland and Spain direct.
Around the UK,
just across the Bay of Biscay,
outside of British waters. So you'll be happy, you little Brexiteers.
This is it. But I mean, that's only one ship. How long is it going to take and come back? So you're not going to solve our problem. You might be able to get a certain amount of ships and a certain amount of this, unless the EU decides.
But something that
you can fly, and we do. export a
costs
lot
a fortune, though.
by flying, but that's like medicines and things that aren't very heavy.
Yeah.
You can't export a lot of the agricultural or indeed the other stuff that we produce in the Republic of Ireland, which is a highly productive area, right? So,
But then a lot of what you produce in the Republic is also part processed in the north.
well, indeed.
Which is what these 45 million truck journeys every year are doing.
It's part of it because
they're building something going up to the north, part processing, coming back to the south, and it does go backwards and forwards a lot.
Well, most of the milk from around here is processed in the Republic, right?
Yeah.
And then brought back up here.
Pasteurised or whatever they do with milk.
It's backwards and forwards all the time. And that's perfectly normal in this economy we have now. That's going to change at the end of March.
Because the farmers will all be out of business.
Well, you won't be able to get a truck beyond the border for a start-off,
Yep.
right? Because the license, but on top of that, the
License,
queue of
insurance,
X amount of hours and
The milk's
so on.
gone off.
Exactly.
Butter's gone
And,
off. Jesus.
the factory can't produce, so the workers are laid off.
And am I right in thinking there aren't enough vets?
There's not enough vets.
Animal transfer, you mean?
If there's a crash out of the EU right now, like if in March the EU crashes out and the British government has to bring in its control of its borders, they said, right, they're going to actually have to employ hundreds and hundreds of vets to check the food coming in and out. Right? They don't have them.
Well, they say it can be done at source, so it can be done at the slaughterhouse. And if you've got a slaughterhouse in, I don't know, Londonderry, and you have an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, for example,
Yeah.
the news reports and the media will talk about an outbreak of foot and mouth disease in Northern Ireland and in Londonderry or wherever it happens to be. And that will be all headline news. If you've got border checks in there, the European Union press will say, hey, look, we managed to stop foot and mouth coming into the European Union. And the headlines are totally different. And again, it's about the language, because if you have the border in there and you're checking the stuff coming in, it's a totally different scenario.
Well, it's funny you say about the checking the stuff. There is, you hear the DUP ranting on about there can be no differences between the Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom, but there already are, and there's already checks, and particularly on animal goods, because actually we didn't have foot and mouth here.
No.
The risk was coming from England. So actually, a lot of the meat
So,
and
even
products
more
coming
meat.
in from England into Ireland get checked in Scotland or wherever, if they're coming that way. They actually get checked there for that reason.
So you've got checks already.
There are already
East-West.
checks. Yes, there are east-west checks. Now, okay, it's around veterinary and it's around protection
I
of
think it's
people's health and safety.
SPS or PSP, so, sanitary and phytosanitary checks.
Yeah.
So they could just extend that a bit, right? And they could. The only solution to the backstop that we talked about earlier and the Irish question is to have some form of a border on the Irish Sea.
Yeah.
That's the only
It
solution.
doesn't have to be on the Irish Sea. It can be in the ports on each side. Yeah.
And that means that the UK can go forward and actually
And get
negotiate
a
a
withdrawal
deal.
agreement.
Yes, right. Now, the only people who are stopping that at the moment are actually one party, the DUP, and one woman, Arlene
Theresa May.
Foster.
Well, no.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no, but
the
don't-
DUP is stopping it because they will refuse to support Theresa May, and Theresa May's
Exactly.
worried about her own job and
Exactly.
her political career. Because
Yeah.
Theresa May, your political career, you seem to think, is more important than 65 million people that live in our country. It's our livelihoods, our households across the UK that you're pissing around with. And Labour are just as bad. But Theresa May specifically, without the DUP support, you're dead. Right? You can't put in, but your political career is, you can't put in a border because the DUP won't let you. The Conservative Party of the United Kingdom being held to ransom by 10 members of Parliament from Northern Ireland. And then who's running the politics and democracy in over here in Northern Ireland at the Assembly? We've got no government at the moment. There's no power sharing agreement. Sinn Féin and the DUP thought they could get together and run this and share it and make it happen. They haven't been able to. And then you think about the livelihoods that are being affected. I mean, hill farming and sort of meat farming and dairy farming is huge up here in the north.
Well, it's one of the biggest industries in Ireland, full stop. But
Well,
like-
70% of their income comes from European Union funding.
Did you see on the plane when you came off? Did you see in Belfast Airport they had on the floor as you were walking? It was the meat, the milk and the cheese and the
Oh,
butter.
the butters,
Did you
all
see
the
the
signs all over the
adverts as you
floor.
got-
Yeah. But the DUP
Huge.
claim to be champions of the farming sector up here, and yet what they're actually
Enemies.
doing is cutting farmers' income by 50%. They're going to halve the income of farmers up here. What are they going to do? Would you carry on your business if you just lost half your income? Of course you
Well,
wouldn't.
no, I mean, like,
Of course you wouldn't.
They're going to go.
a lot of people are going to go bust. I mean, a lot of people are going to go
And
bust.
that means more depression, more suicide, more
And it
families
also means
torn
more
apart,
violence, because
and
when
more
people
violence.
are out of work, they're
Yeah.
going to blame somebody.
Yeah.
And if you're coming from a diehard DUP background, you're going to blame the EU, the nationalists, everybody else except their own party. But actually, the reality is this: is the DUP are the one thing that's stopping an agreement between the British government and the EU right now, because the other two things can be solved. Right?
Yeah, that's
The other
pretty
two,
much are.
yeah, they are more or less agreed.
More or less.
Only thing that's stopping it now. So therefore, the DUP are prepared to risk the economic future, not only of Northern Ireland, but the Republic of Ireland, as well as the UK, that they're meant to be so loyal to.
And
Supposedly.
So they're putting their own party interests against the interests of the Northern
Guys,
Irish people,
but not
the
just the
Irish
farmers.
people,
Look at the bigger
and
picture
the
here.
UK
Hang
public.
on, pull out, right?
Right.
Look at the bigger picture here. We are destabilizing the Western world.
But that's
We are
true too.
purposefully going out and saying to a rules-based organisation like the EU, we don't want to play by your rules anymore. We're then turning around to the WTO, which is a rules-based organisation, and saying we
As
don't want
well.
to play by your rules either.
Right.
We are.
We're so special. We demand acceptance.
We are throwing this instability into the Western world in the worst possible time to do it, because we've got Putin on one side of us, we've got Trump on the other, both who don't have our best interests at heart.
don't.
And
Of
if
course
you
they don't.
think that they do, you are f***ing deluded, because they do not.
That was
I'm
a big
sorry.
swear word.
I know, but it really gets to me, the fact that people think that they are being very British by pushing this Brexit thing. They're being, it's what Winston Churchill would have wanted. No. It's actually the opposite of what Winston Churchill would have wanted.
And even
it's the
Margaret
opposite
Thatcher.
of what Margaret Thatcher would have
Indeed.
wanted.
What are the
She
creators of the single market?
She basically invented the single market, which we're now pulling out of.
Right.
So these people who think
but we're
that
not- but we're not, though.
they're maintaining this tradition, this history of Britain standing firm in the world, they are so deluded. Because Britain never did that. Britain always stood for
Take advantage of whatever.
stood for its own interests, and now we're working against our own interests. But it was always the smartest player in the room. Whenever you had a diplomatic meeting, people looked to the British and went, "Okay, you seem to know what you're talking about." We have sent clowns and buffoons into the international arena. Liam
Literal
Fox,
clowns.
idiot. Hunt saying this week that the EU was like the USSR. Could you think of a more insulting thing to say to the people of Latvia, the people of Estonia, the people of Lithuania, who were
and Poland.
who were massacred
Absolutely.
by the Soviets?
Or the Czech people who drove their tanks in
Polish people,
1966.
this is
the
government.
Hungarians who the Russians drove in their tanks in 1958.
And-
You're
and-
an embarrassment
they are
to me.
comparing-
I'm embarrassed to be British by this government.
Boris
this government is
Johnson.
embarrassing me.
Boris Johnson comparing, was it the French to the commandants in concentration camps?
Well, it gets worse every day, right? This is the thing
It
now.
does, every day.
Is I'm a European. We're all Europeans. We're all Europeans.
I was born here.
I happen to be an Irish European. You happen to be a British or UK European. Great. We get on great. We have been getting on great for a long time. There is no issue, right?
so the last
and
couple of
the
decades.
best friends that Ireland has in the EU, and the best friends that the UK has in the EU is Ireland, and vice versa, because we have a lot of common interests. And then when it came to hold on, let me
Ireland's
finish.
best friend is the European Union.
No. Let
Ireland's
me
best friend
explain.
is in
But
Brussels.
within
It's
the
not Britain anymore.
Hold on, not anymore.
No.
But
Oh,
within,
okay. But it
was.
historically,
Yeah.
since we both joined the EU at more the same time.
At the same time.
So what happened was that Ireland and England have a lot more in common than Italy and Germany or Czech, whatever, right? So when it comes to policy, the English and Irish governments were like this and going into Europe to negotiate for what was best
Because
for the
we're
British
better
Isles
together.
or Ireland.
Because we're better together.
Because we're better
We're
together.
stronger together when
Exactly.
you partner up with friends.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
So
get it. I
now
get
we're
it.
in a situation where the UK is about to fall out. It's going to find itself
We're
like
not falling. We're being dragged, kicking and screaming by our hair.
well. I would almost maintain illegally dragged out of the EU because the vote was a sham.
Yeah, it was an advisory referendum.
Advisory
and
referendum.
Vote Leave and Leave.eu both not only cheated but broke the law.
That's correct.
And when Ben Johnson had his gold medal stripped of him because he cheated, everyone said that's fair. When Lance Armstrong had his Tour de France medals, championships taken from him, everyone said that is completely fair because he cheated. When the Russian athletes in 2012 in London had their medals taken from them because they cheated, everyone said yes, that's fair. That's the rules of cricket.
Right.
That's the way it should be. That's a rules-based system. And we are just turning around now and saying, well, on the back of this bogus referendum.
See, the law's different for referendums. If this vote in 2016 had happened in a general election, it would have been illegal and overturned, and we would have had a revote
That's
already.
correct.
Yeah,
But the law is different.
If it had been a local referendum, it would have been.
would have been overturned.
Yeah.
But we're off topic. We zoomed out quite a bit.
But
I want to zoom back in again.
But getting back to Ireland, right? So let's put it this way. I think we've discussed the economics, we've discussed the political thing. But again, I just want to bring people back to the fact that this is actually about lives. This is about real people, a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old that were killed down the road there, along with dozens of other people in the area, and the 18 British troops that were shot at Warren Point on the 20-something of August, the same day that Mountbatten got blown up. Yeah. There was 18, and the driver of the lorry, one of the lorries got blown up. All was left of him, a 19-year-old from poor kid from somewhere in
switch
England,
off now
right?
if you don't like too much detail. But I mean, please carry on. But
always left of him, according to the
news.
newspapers that I read, and they can go online and check them. All they found of him was his pelvis bone welded to the metal seat of the lorry. That was all that was left of him. Then, in the anger and frustration and confusion afterwards, the troops that were left saw two people across the river, which was in the Republic, and they thought it was the terrorists, and they shot them. One of them was killed. He was actually an English tourist who was 28, and guess what? His father was a coach driver for the Queen of England and worked at Buckingham Palace. So you have British soldiers.
The other person?
The other person,
a young girl or something?
Was a young guy, age 18, and recovered from his injuries, right? But why I'm saying this is, it's young people, it's people being killed. I don't care if they're English or Irish.
This is
Catholic
within
or
my
Protestant,
lifetime. This is within living memory.
This is These
aren't things of the past.
In our country.
And to go back there, because
but
one thing that we've learned
this.
today, talking to people in Stormont and in Belfast, is that effectively Northern Ireland is a fledgling democracy. It really is.
It's a startup,
and it
as
needs.
Well. It's
It's a startup. It needs
and
support.
Brexit is about to
help.
smash it to pieces again, right?
Yeah,
but it's
a
totally
delicate
reliant.
thing that is being nurtured by the communities coming together slowly but surely over the last 20 years. And at the moment, you've got no government here. It's direct rule from Westminster, and it has been for 2 years. And you've got this situation in which everything that was built up during the Good Friday Agreement talks, which went over, what was it, 6 years? How long was the negotiations going on?
Actually, it really started in the 70s all the way up. It took about 20 years because
to get to that.
That was a long peace process. Long peace process.
It took a long time to get
and a lot of people
to turn around
died.
and sit around the
A
table.
lot of people died unnecessarily.
A lot of
Over
people were
3,000 already. Over 3,000.
A lot of people were
killed
murdered.
during
Let's
that
not just say they died. People
Murdered.
were murdered by one side or the other.
And not just here in Ireland, Warrington.
Well,
two boys who were killed in Warrington.
Of course, and London and Birmingham and
Manchester,
Guildford,
the Arndale Centre. I remember that really well.
The viewers will understand that in the times of what we're now flippantly calling the Troubles, a lot of people died. But bring it right up to date to 2018. One of the people we met this morning, her mother-in-law, had an eye operation, or a problem with her eye, and the NHS up here in Northern Ireland, they told her that they couldn't fit her in time, and don't worry about it, you've got another eye, so you can't have the operation here.
Unbelievable.
So the daughter-in-law went online and social media and said, look, I've got this problem, what can we do? And eventually somebody in the Republic of Ireland, 15 metres away, said, look, we can do that operation for you, and because we're all members of the European Union together, why don't you send your stepmom, your mother-in-law down to us, and we'll sort the eye out, we'll fix her eye, and they did.
Yeah.
There's other things like off on the northwest coast of Ireland, there's a lot of cliffs up there, and the Atlantic Ocean's crashing in all the time. Guy falls off the cliff. There's no sort of rescue helicopters up here. So you dial 999. Guess who comes to rescue you if you've fallen off a cliff? A helicopter from the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah,
all
that's
of this stops. When we split,
And vice versa, you know. I mean, there are people from the Republic getting operations in Northern Ireland and vice versa.
Because
so
happens,
it's an all-island economy.
That's exactly it.
Ireland has always been one country, one island,
It is
until
one island.
1921. Until
Thanks, Oliver.
You know,
Cromwell.
Well,
That was 1921.
I don't even want to go back
let's
there.
not go back that
Let's
far,
not
yeah.
go back that far. But since the Normans arrived in Ireland in 1169, there's been warfare of one sort or another.
Yeah.
This is one of the longest periods of time that there hasn't been in this island.
Yeah. Because you cooperate over here.
Well, actually, the other thing is most people actually do really get on. Yeah. Oh, what was it we heard this morning? That was the best saying from our friend about the...
Hold that thought, because I want to come back to that. 'Cause I want to talk about something you just mentioned about the north and the south. It's not just helicopters coming to the north and people going from the north to the south. There's a phenomenal kids hospital in Dublin, right? So the kids from the north, if they need operations, there are no equivalent kids hospitals in the north, but they do have brilliant cancer hospitals, cancer treatment in the north that they don't have in the south. And this is that back and forth that we were talking about.
It's an all-island economy.
It's an all-island economy. That's exactly it.
And that's what the EU is creating. And with the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, it created an environment, and by purpose, the government of the Republic of Ireland, with the Northern Ireland Assembly, with the British government, actually put in place the power grids, the
United Power Grid, single power grid,
the united effectively a lot of the industries, be it the agricultural, the milk.
But that wasn't just the UK and Ireland. That was the EU as well. If you look at
it was
the hurling
the EU helped fund this, right? The EU has been hugely important in funding, like Northern Ireland, and is now still one of the most underdeveloped and, shall we say, deprived economically parts of the United Kingdom and indeed of Europe. Right.
But people want to work. They want to do this. It's not like they're layabouts sitting back saying, "Oh no, we're underdeveloped. We don't want a job." They actually want to work. I'm not going to mention the guy's name because everything we do is under Chatham House. So he's.
Remember the statement that person you talk about, right? That we met, the second person we met this morning. He came up with a fantastic quote. I don't know if he wrote.
I was going to talk about the Econ Musée.
Well, it was even before that. Remember what he said about the religion and the politicians, and that what was that?
They're working to divide us.
Exactly. Yeah. He says the ordinary people are, and on a very local level and on a regional level, people just have to get on because they live next door to each other. What are they going to do? Start stabbing each other? No. And they get on locally, and it's unionists and nationalists and so on, because one supports the other in different ways, right? Because it's part of a local community.
Yeah.
What's good for the local community is good for the local community, right? The problem with politics in Northern Ireland is unfortunately it seems to be run by people who are more interested in their own political agenda rather than the good of the people and the good of the country of Northern Ireland, if you want to call it that, and indeed the island of Ireland. That's the problem. It's the religious and political bodies that are creating the division to stay in positions of power, because that's what they live on.
Local parliaments, local authorities, local elect, and we elect these people. Local members of parliament in Westminster do the same thing. They're all bothered about themselves, party politics, and yet the people, exactly as you described it, they work together.
Yeah.
The guy we were talking to, he's talking about a project called Econ Musée, which is started in Quebec. It's a case of taking a traditional little business that's struggling, and the economy has been struggling in Northern Ireland. Whether you're making sticks for the sport of hurling, You know, whether you're making jam, not innovative jam, like artisan. No, I'm thinking Andrea Ledsom's. We make these innovative jams.
Or
that we can
building
sell
holiday cottages in the Glens or somewhere like that.
And they're trying to attract tourists to Northern Ireland because it's now we've got the peace process over.
Yeah.
Because tourists never used to wanted to come here.
But they're
before.
piling in now.
They're piling in now, and you took so
And
they're coming.
with
How do you maximise the money and to build the local economy if you're a small village or a small town and all you make in your village is a small hurling stick manufacturer? What they're doing is they're doing economic tourism, which is this economic museum, and they're turning these shops and manufacturing sites into museums. So you've got a big
showing
glass
people
wall.
how they make hurling sticks,
And you
showing
can
people how
see
they do this, that, and the other.
Yeah, like a little museum. You can see people actually working behind the glass, and they're making cheeses. You've been to these things all over the place, I'd imagine. So these things are happening. And there was a few examples he gave us. One was hurling sticks. One was cheese making, I think it was.
Holiday cottages. They built with £360,000 worth of EU grant. They got these ruined, falling down, dilapidated old houses, cottages, and they did them up. And
with EU money,
so that people could stay there, tourists,
and
because there wasn't enough bed nights in the area, and so this is part of how they're reviving the economy
and rebuilding it.
And the EU money at the end of 30 years, the farmer who owned that dilapidated cottage, he gets back a cottage that's perfectly fixed up. So he's delighted, everybody's happy.
And he can pass it on to his kids, to the next generation. So
Right,
the next generation are better off. So you're not just fixing
all of
the
this is going to
problems now.
stop, by the way, in March. All of it. There'll be
there's
no
more.
more EU money coming into Northern Ireland. In fact, there'll be no more UK money because they're going to be so broke that Northern Ireland costs the taxpayer. Northern Ireland costs the taxpayer in the United Kingdom 11 billion a year. That's the subsidy that comes from UK, if you like, Westminster to Stormont, right? 11 billion quid. So in fact, it's an economically...
That's more than we spend on membership of the EU.
Well, it's equivalent to, 3 of those aircraft carriers they just built unsuccessfully. But anyway, having said all that, the reality is that Northern Ireland has to be subsidised by the UK because the industry has suffered over the years because of the Troubles, and it's only starting to get back on its feet now.
Yeah.
And what are we doing?
I reckon we're
about to absolutely smash it.
Okay,
But we
guys.
don't realise how big a problem that is, though. I mean, there was a lot of talk about community spirit earlier on today.
Yeah.
And they were talking about a small business that's gone bust, and he's just relocated, basically. It was a haulage company, and he's relocated from Northern Ireland to the Republic because he does more of his work in the Republic than he does in the North.
Well, because he can't actually work in the Northern Ireland as of from March.
Exactly.
Because he can't get his trucks onto, so he's actually moving his whole business from a very deprived part of the upper north.
And you say, it's only 5 jobs. Don't worry about it, it's only 5
Yeah,
jobs. It's
but
not 5 jobs.
No.
It's 5 livelihoods. 5 families'
Families.
livelihoods who are no longer working.
And also that company supported the local sports teams.
Exactly. And then we're talking to the community spirit.
Community. So
There was a
that's
sports
destroying-
team that was national champion as well in that
Indeed.
particular instance.
And
5 employees they had. So people say, dismiss, it's only 5 jobs. But they sponsored the local team. And that village and that town, they had a community spirit around that. So when the team was going great, the community spirit was up. When the team wasn't winning so much, if they lose their sponsorship, the team won't be there. And it's not just the one that won the national championship. It's
the youth team.
It's the under
It's the-
18s team. It's the under 16s. It's the under 12s. The kids, the 8-year-olds. Where is their future if you take away those 5 jobs?
But this is the knock-on effects that people who voted for Brexit and are still supporting it now aren't thinking about. And I don't think they don't care about it. I just think that it's not being brought to their
They
attention.
don't understand it. I
Listen,
didn't
guys,
know that. One last point. I promise I'll shut up then. The cruise ships that come in and out of Belfast, there was something 120 cruise ships so far this year have come into Belfast carrying foreign tourists with loads of money, put them into.
all going to the Titanic experience.
That's
et
it. They
cetera,
go
et
into
cetera.
and they
foreign
look around Northern
money,
Ireland.
foreign money coming in from another
and then
country.
they go down to the Republic, they go to the North, easy peasy. The problem is, after we build that border and we leave the European Union, there's not enough coaches to get them from the ferry, the cruise ship terminal, out and around into the country anymore. So currently, the coaches come up from the south, from the Republic, and they pick up the passengers, drive them around the north, spend all their money, going to the Econ Musée and all the rest of it. But those coaches won't be able to come back up anymore. The passengers won't be able to go to the south. the whole thing, Brexit's not going to help social cohesion here. Building a border, it's not going to help the economy. It's not going to help the
farmers.
GFA. It won't help with workforces.
It won't help with
Brexit's
political
a bloody
cohesion.
disaster. Every single
Help with
angle you look at
Stormont
it.
getting back together.
I said that was my last point, and I'm done.
The only thing,
Robert,
there is one,
Robert,
but
can
let
I
me
just-
I have a very important
can
thing
I
to say.
just
Very, very
say-
important.
There's
Last
so
thing.
much more.
Last
There's
thing.
so much more to talk about.
Yeah.
Let's do another one
We're
tonight.
planning to go to Dublin now,
Yeah.
right? Would you be up for doing another one of these with us? Because we're well
Well,
over
if
time.
you buy me another
now.
half pint, I will.
Another half pint to
No,
get
you're
us.
in Dublin.
I need
Damn,
fuel.
Robert, you are a cheap date.
But I just want to finish on an important point, right? Is the UK and Ireland are completely interdependent on each other, right? And the only thing that Brexit is good for, actually in a funny way, is the dissolution of the United Kingdom. Because, I hear on the radio and television for the last few weeks and before, Theresa May and all these people saying, we're not going to do anything that's going to break up the United Kingdom, right?
Except she is.
But that's exactly
exactly
the
what
point.
she's doing.
That's the point. She and the DUP are breaking up the United Kingdom. Why? Because they're going to drive the people in Northern Ireland to want to vote to join the Republic to get back into the EU. Right? That's on that side. On the other side of the bit of water, it's the Scots.
Yeah.
The Scots are going to have another referendum within the next 5 years, and they're going to leave, especially if the UK is not part of the EU.
Hey,
The
Ben Mc-
Scots are going to leave.
We're
Ben
actually planning to
McPherson,
do
that's it.
a podcast from Scotland,
Right.
addressing that very point, because in the 2015 referendum, they were lied to.
The Scottish Parliament's Minister for Europe is a guy.
It was Cameron who slapped them in the
2015 or
face the day.
2014.
He almost laughed at them the day after the referendum. Cameron did. But anyway, besides that, just to reiterate, the people are going to be responsible to wrap up. The people who are going to be responsible for the breakup of the United Kingdom are the DUP and the Conservative and Unionist parties. Bang.
And on that bombshell, thank you, Robert, for joining us for Three Blokes.
pleasure.
Really, really good.
Looking forward to the next
Interruptions.
half of
Look
a
at that.
pint.
Yeah. And as always,
Cheers.
Stop Brexit.